Well, hello and welcome to the July episode of Brainstorms, our podcast dealing with the veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan who are dealing with those storms within their brain due to underdiagnosed or untreated traumatic brain injury. And this July episode is so very important because we've talked about the various consequences of an untreated traumatic brain injury, that of substance abuse and unemployment, homelessness, and the final consequence, the fatal consequence, is suicide. So this particular podcast is all about suicide prevention. We're here again in our beautiful Sycamore Studios in Plain City, Ohio. They've been with us this whole way. Today's episode, we'll be talking about something very important coming up next month in August. And I have a very special guest, someone who's very near and dear to all of us at Resurrecting Lives Foundation. It's Mr. Patrick Romeo from my hometown of Youngstown, Ohio. Patrick is the epitome of a public servant, and he won't want my saying that, but he really is. He has been in the U.S. Air Force. He's been a firefighter in Youngstown for years. He's now working for FEMA in the Department of Homeland Security. And what he's about to accomplish in August for the second time in his life, few people would even think about. Without further wait here, I want to introduce you to my good friend and one of my heroes, Mr. Patrick Romeo. Patrick, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So you came all the way down on your motorcycle from Y-Town is my town.
Yes.
About 180 miles from here, but that's nothing compared to what you're about to do. So why don't you just talk to our audience a little bit and tell us what you do in your spare time on your vacation time?
First and foremost is with family. I mean, nothing is more important than family. But then for me is I enjoy long distance motorcycle riding. And there's a few different ways I do that. There's an organization called the IBA, Iron Butt Association.
Okay.
That is long distance rides. But what you were alluding to, which you said I will accomplish, I'm going to attempt, I hope I accomplish, starting August 4th is the Hoka Hey Motorcycle Challenge. And that is a 10,000-mile endurance ride.
And tell me just a little bit about, Hoka Hey, it sounds Native American. It is Native American. A little bit about why you're there and what they do to promote this.
So originally I did this, as you know, in 2020. And at that time, the challenge, it's open to American motorcycles, American V-twin motorcycles only. The challenge is there's no electronic navigation. So, and you do not know the route. Everyone lines up, and about 20 minutes before you leave, they hand you turn-by-turn directions, and that's what you have to follow. Those turn-by-turn directions get you to the first checkpoint, and then they'll give you the next set of directions until you get to the end. The second part of it is you're not allowed to carry any spare fuel with you. It's what's on the bike. And then to me, the hardest part is you sleep with the bike. There's no hotels, no Airbnbs, nothing like that. So I set out to challenge myself in 2020 because I've done a lot of long-distance rides and I've done a lot of multi-day rides, but I've never kind of put them together. So I did this in 2020, and with Resurrecting Lives.
We were so thankful.
When you do this ride, one of their requirements is that you choose a charity of your choice and raise funds for that charity. And because of our background and, you know, what you've done for me with my injuries in the fire service, the veterans choosing Resurrecting Lives was... There was no second thought. I mean, that was automatic. But when I crossed the finish line in 2020, I finished it in 13 days.
That's amazing. I mean, just think about that. People do the math. I mean, that's like how many miles a day?
It's about 800 miles a day.
And how many hours a day?
Because it's all secondary roads.
Yes.
No freeways, so that's about 20 hours a day of riding.
And then 4 hours of sleeping on the dirt. Okay.
Or picnic tables, whatever you can find.
Wow.
So yes, in 2020, when I hit the finish line, I accomplished what I set out to do.
Oh.
So I had no intent that I was ever going to do this again because I had nothing else to prove.
Okay.
In 2020, my assigned number my rider number was
Okay.
988.
Okay.
That number stays with me.
Okay.
And then, as you know, in 2020, they rolled out the 3-digit suicide and crisis lifeline in place of a 10-digit number. But what you didn't remember at that time, and why I called you, was to remind you that my rider number is that same 988. And we both immediately
I just get chills every time you say that.
Yes, and it was more than a coincidence.
That's divine intervention with that you were given it to begin with. You know, I always talk about God being the ultimate script writer. I mean, you were given that number. We didn't know significance. It was easy to remember, 988. But then come a couple months later and they start talking about it, and within a year it becomes a suicide hotline. That is amazing.
Yes.
So what did that do to you when you see that?
Well, it wasn't just the fact that it was the suicide and crisis lifeline, but again, knowing our veterans are, according to the VA, a little over 1.5 times more likely, to take their own lives. The other big number is 22. That's been a kind of a call for a long time. On average, 22 veterans are dying by suicide every day.
Right.
And there's no reason for that. Help is out there.
Right.
So,
and one of the most important things that happened right before you signed up for this as well was when the Department of Defense and the Pentagon come out with the statistics that a veteran from Iraq and Afghanistan is 5 times more likely of dying by suicide than in combat. So we had about 7,100 men and women who lost their lives in Iraq in combat, in theater, from combat wounds, and nearly 35,000 by the end of this year, nearly 5 times that number who will die after they come home. And that's not acceptable to anyone. No.
So, I mean, the fact that I could do this ride again, and again, that's all in thanks to our veterans, that I have that we all have these freedoms that we take for granted.
Right.
That I could do this ride and try to give them some of that support back, support Resurrecting Lives in advocating for them and raising awareness of that 988 number.
Right.
I will be riding 10,000 miles across the country with that number plastered on my windshield.
And it's really visible. I mean, we just saw it's very visible. You have it done very well. I don't know how you see where you see above that.
You don't look through the motorcycle windshield. You actually look over them.
I gotcha. Okay. So anybody, you're not going to be, though, on the major thoroughfares, and you're going from Florida to Homer, Alaska. So we're talking, you're going to be in a lot of wooded areas, hills, mountains. That's fairly dangerous riding, isn't it? I mean, there's no lights.
Correct. I mean, a lot of it, we're going to have kind of the whole gamut. We start in Daytona Beach.
Okay.
We go to Key West.
Okay.
And then, so you have a lot of, even if they try to divert you, you got a lot of urban area, I was in Florida for about 9 months with work, and it's not a safe place to ride a motorcycle at any time.
Right, I'm sure.
But then from there, I have a rough idea. While I don't know the exact route, I kind of have an idea. We're going to cross the southern part of the U.S.
Okay.
Arizona, New Mexico, kind of making almost a U-turn until going up to Montana.
Okay.
And then through the Alaskan Highway. So, yeah, we're going to have the whole gamut of desert, mountains, city, no man's land.
Yeah. And I remember last year when we were following you, and there were a couple other people that some of our vets were following. There was, for instance, like a near fatal. It didn't turn out to be fatal, thank heavens, but elk to motorcycle encounter, in the middle of the night. So there are things like that. So I guess, anybody who's, into saying some prayers for Patrick, we certainly did and encouraged our veterans to do so, because this is not just even getting in a car where you're surrounded by metal and driving 10,000 miles. It's actually being out in the elements the whole time.
Correct. But it's, a big part of it is riding within your ability, knowing your limitations, which in a lot of ways kind of relates to that 988 number, knowing when it's time to look for help.
Right,
When
exactly.
it's time to slow down. So it's kind of it's the same thing.
And we kind of say the first time somebody kind of tells you that, are you okay? That's when you should be thinking about it. Don't wait until, you're way down the line. And I know that's not the military way of doing things. I know that. That's not the first responder way. But as we were talking about, our first responders, our military makes up 1% of our population. And you are carrying the load for keeping us safe and putting out fires and, keeping our property for an entire nation. And I really do believe it's time for the 99% of us in the civilian world who don't take on that risk to at least, assist with education and jobs and, helping the families when somebody's deployed. And definitely employers can do a much better job of employing veterans and actually employing them, not hiring them, not giving them a trial period, but, hiring them and seeing them through an employment period of, 5 years or more. That's what we are hoping for. And I'd like to go back as I was able to speak to a couple of the members of the Lakota tribe who were where this originated, where the Hoka Hey originated. And it was very amazing to me that in that tribe, 82% of the people in that tribe serve in the U.S. military, and that's male and female. They reach, either the end of high school or end of college, and they serve in the military. They're only beaten by the Navajo Nation that has 86% of their population. Now, that's incredible. I was just saying 99% of us don't serve, but in our Native American cultures,
it's almost flipped.
It is totally flipped, exactly. And they are the ones that actually contacted us at Resurrecting Lives when you signed up last time and said, we want to know more about what you're doing because we really appreciate that idea. One of the things that we're really working on and we'll be working on more next year for suicide prevention is to get our veterans into sustainable farming and saving the environment. Again, so many veterans don't want a job, they want a mission, and saving the world is part of your DNA, You have family members that served as well, correct?
Yes, my grandfather was World War I. My uncle was in World War II. My father was in the Korean War. Excuse me. I have a son-in-law that served in Iraq. My wife's side of the family, she's got cousins that serve. So, yes, we come from, my wife and I both come from a very veteran, strong family.
Right. And your wife, Rochelle, if I could just mention her first name, is like one, we were talking once about her name being Rock, and she is the rock of society. She takes care of so many people up in Youngstown, Ohio, so many interconnections. And a shout out to her because without her, neither you nor I have this opportunity.
Correct. Yeah, she's very, very supportive of, again, not just her own family, but that's just her nature, to care for people and to organize. And I wouldn't be doing this without her support.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be knowing how to do any of this without her support. So I'm really happy about that. So we have the Lakota tribe that kind of started, and it has all of the markings of going back to basics, sleeping outside, knowing your way from the terrain, not from the freeway, not from using your cell phones, I find that very interesting as well, going back to the intuitive way of living, which in that way is also knowing when you're off balance, when things aren't adding up. And that's why I think that you're calling the suicide hotline and getting some help with perhaps you're just in the process of changing over from military to civilian world to get some resources available. And that's one of the things that will be on our website, as well as, if you guys, anybody wants to go to resurrectinglives.org, look up Hoka Hey event. Patrick's videos will be there, as will be your Facebook postings as you take off on August 4th. There's a lot of significance with your landing in Alaska this time, and we talked about that. And there's major U.S. Air Force bases up there. We also note that in our state of Alaska, totally removed from the lower 48, 25% of the people in Alaska have served in the military. Now, that's an incredible number. You're not going to find 1 out of 4 in Ohio. You're not going to find 1 out of 4 anywhere else. But I think that is very significant. And they're looking forward to your landing in their state. And we're going to be making a presentation, our foundation, of a flag, the Alaskan flag for the United States flag for Alaska. So it'll have Aurora Borealis in the background. The other problem that we have up there is it's got the largest suicide rate in the nation as well, for both the military and the veteran population. So we're going to be doing some things. The last time we collected nearly $25,000 for suicide prevention. 95 cents on the dollar to 98 cents on the dollar goes directly to those services. And last time we concentrated a lot because it was, kind of getting into the pre-pandemic, what's going on here kind of stuff, to virtual things. We had meditation, mindfulness. People were writing journals. People began writing editorials about what we can do to help keep the nation together, and following you on that way was very amazing. I'd like to bring up one of the veterans that I told you about even when you were writing, a Vietnam veteran by the name of Dino Krantz. Dino Krantz was in our AMVETS post number 26 in Mansfield, Ohio, that has done more to support us than any other post in the nation. And he was in the ICU.
Cleveland.
And he got the little blurb about the Facebook thing, and he followed you on Facebook in the ICU from the moment that it would be dawn's early light to the end, and every day he would call me to check on what your status was. And I remember, writing down notes because I even mentioned to you that you literally gave that veteran, that Vietnam veteran, a reason to stay alive. And his reason to stay alive was to help support you in the mission. So he would call me in the morning and goes, okay, weather's looking bad where Patrick's going to be going. If he calls in, I go, well, he doesn't call in to me. Well, call his wife and tell him, And I remember when you were really pushing it the last time, those last couple of days, you were pushing it. And he called me up and says, oh, Dr. Gordon, get him off the road. It was really cool. And he goes, I came out of the ICU today, and I'm going to see him when I get done. And that's one person we know of. But there were, hundreds of other veterans that were watching you on that route. And we're projecting there's going to be thousands this time. So what is kind of your feeling about that what you're able to do is almost drag people with you, because many of us don't ride motorcycles. We're not brave enough. We're not skilled enough. We're not smart enough, but and we're not healthy enough,
Part of it, I guess, is, I don't want to say embarrassment, but I'm not one for the spotlight. I know to think that I'm doing anything special or than anyone else. But I do know, again, when I did the ride last time, I started out, the ride was for me to see if I could do this challenge, if I could challenge myself. And as the ride went on, and talking with you about Dean, and then even some of the communications that I got from other individuals that had either parents that had lost a son or daughter that were following me, or a spouse. By the end of the ride, personally, I got more out of some of those stories than I did the reason when I started the ride.
Yeah, it was amazing.
I will say, and if anyone that followed me last time is listening now, I apologize. I don't do social media. I had no clue that people could comment or post, back to me.
Right.
Luckily, again, my wife, she would watch. I would talk to her every night. Apparently, she was asking me your questions, and then she would reply.
Yeah, she did a great job
on my behalf. So we already have that plan this year. She's going to do that for me this year. Because now that I know it can be done, again, I'm still riding 18 to 20 hours a day.
Right.
And when I get done, the last thing I want to do is this.
Right. And you're in the dark. You're going to be in the dark so much of the time. That's for sure, too.
Right.
And again, so we're going to be doing a better job too on our website, resurrectinglives.org. Remember last time we were never, we didn't even get the word out kind of in time because it was new to all of us. And so we are getting the word out. There's lots of people across the nation that know that you're doing it. And this is a national campaign. And we will be, News Nation will be following you on this journey, according to the rules of which we can't literally follow you. We can only kind of see where you're landing and when you'll be landing in Alaska. And we will be there, to greet you and to speak to the people of Alaska about how the lower 48 stands behind them. They have dealt with a lot of things that none of us have to deal with. And to the veterans point, you've got 6 months where you're in the dark. I mean, the military members and the veterans there are literally in the dark for 6 months, which is one of the reasons why the suicide rate is so great. And then the last few years of 21, 22, 23, I mean, there's been 15, 18, 19 deaths by suicide in both the military and veterans there, and that we found unacceptable. So one of the reasons you'll be riding, people can sponsor you by going to Amazon, and we have the links of the seasonal affective disorder lighting we're talking about. These lights actually can sit on your desktop and provide you with natural sunlight, wavelength. And what that does is that helps promote the brain to begin making more serotonin. Serotonin's kind of our mellow hormone, one that I don't have a whole lot of, but, mellow, calm, and also helps you get to sleep. And so what we're hoping is to kind of keep that rhythm of 12 hours of light going for them, or at least 10, because it gets down to 4 hours. And what so many of the young military members that I've talked to up there says, they're coming from the Midwest here. They're coming from California, the land of sunshine and fun, they're coming from Texas, and they go up there and it's 50 degrees below zero in the Fairbanks stations, it's that way for 4 to 6 months a year, there is no break. And a couple of them said to me, Doc, if you don't drink and you don't ice fish, there's nothing to do. So luckily the Department of Defense, took some listen to that. And, it's just me, I'm like flash to bang. Let's do things a little quicker, if we can. Let's get you're working for the government. Let's get the government, working just a little bit quicker than it does. But they were able to get some things like, gaming among the different barracks, and the Xboxes and all of the different types of video games and more sports. So they built some arenas for basketball and this and that. But we really need, as the civilian world, to contact our congresspeople, contact our senators. And luckily, our foundation is in contact with both senators. Senator Lisa Murkowski and Senator Dan Sullivan from Alaska have been very helpful and have been listening to us since September when you and I started talking about this way back then. And they are very supportive, and Senator Sullivan himself is a Marine, So I think that they really push for veterans things and veterans legislation. And so I really want people to pay attention, not just us, but what's going on in Alaska. What would you say, since you've been in the military, to that young person, I've never have, who comes from his, beautiful farm in Iowa? This was the two kids that I were talking. They came from Iowa. They've been out running in the cornfields. They've had, their whole life was there. And suddenly they're in the middle of the Arctic. How do you cope with that?
I mean, I'm not sure that I can give you an answer. I mean, everybody kind of copes in their own way. For me, riding is my outlet.
Gotcha.
That wouldn't be, Alaska 6 months out of the year wouldn't be real conducive to riding a motorcycle.
Right.
But maybe I would look at ATVs, snowmobiles. But yeah, you just, I don't know if they still have it. When I was in the Air Force a few years ago, they had what was called MWR, which was Morale, Welfare, Recreation.
Right.
And that was kind of their goal, was for your mental well-being, to give you outlets to do something. So explore those outlets. The biggest thing is talk to somebody. A lot of people, especially in the military, you feel if you need to ask someone for help, that's a sign of weakness. When in all reality, that's a sign of strength.
Absolutely.
If you can ask somebody for help, there is no bigger sign of personal strength than that.
Correct.
And that's a good first step.
I think one of the other things that's overlooked a bit is when we talk about combat injuries of traumatic brain injury. I can tell you that at least 1/3 of the veterans that I have been in touch with over the last 12 years were injured in training. I mean, received traumatic brain injury. You don't learn to jump out of a plane airborne
Without jumping out of a plane.
without jumping out of a plane and getting concussed. I mean, you just don't do that. So many things in the U.S. Air Force, which I hadn't anticipated, is working around the aircraft and the different things like that. Not seeing where you're about to bump into, or raising up when you're working on something, and those are pretty significant injuries as well. You brought up about the fact that you like motorcycle riding, and I've got to tell you a big, huge shout out to the Combat Veterans Motorcycle Associations across the nation. Well, we had one in Indiana that was led by Paul Vogel, a Vietnam veteran who has since passed since your last ride due to effects of Agent Orange, but was following you closely and donated to us closely and had fundraisers for us. I mean, it really is kind of the mission of you all to take care of your own. But we need to get a little bit of that. That needs to be contagious and kind of spill over to the civilian world as well. And I think that's why programs like these are so important, to get people in the civilian world like myself into your mindset of, no, we don't ask for help, and we really should. I mean, and we need somewhere in the Department of Defense, and everybody knows these are my own opinions, but I don't have trouble saying them. But, we can't have toxic leadership up there either. You've got to have leadership that understands that one of the most amazing things with this younger generation is that they are global thinkers. They don't think about the enemy as being across a border. They think of games and communications and the internet that connects them to an entire world. And I find them to be better thinkers at negotiations and working things out. And I think that in the ultimate run is going to be a very important thing.
And I also think you mentioned, toxic leadership. You have leadership that doesn't necessarily hesitate to send our men and women to combat somewhere if they feel it necessary. Right. But they then need to follow up with that when our men and women come back.
Exactly.
Again, my personal opinion, too often it seems like the government is quick to forget about them.
Right, and it's interesting because next year coming out will be a Forbes Foundation book that they have entrusted Resurrecting Lives Foundation to work on with a Washington Post Pulitzer Prize finalist, Gary Lee, talking just about that. Okay, and the thing is, when you've got somebody in the military, how do you transition? The Department of Defense is an employer. And it's the only employer I know that has no liability for things that happen under their employment. Because once you're deployed back home, you become part of the VA, a totally different government system. And there's not clearly a soft handoff just yet. But we're going to make sure that that's going to happen. So, we're going to be mentioning that on our website right underneath your ride, to see about that. Because, again, I think, we are in an election year. We are in a chaotic election year. And I've got to say that one of the reasons why I was so thankful and so happy you were doing this is the most suicide threat calls I got on my unlisted cell phone, and they came in from 29 states, came in during that last election. And this one is almost, if not more, chaotic than the last one was. The good news is we're not burning our cities anymore and doing the rioting that was going on then. But, people in the civilian world, put your mindset in. One of the guys who called me just started listing names, Patrick. He just started listing names, and I start writing them down. Like, at first I didn't, because I didn't know what was going on, and I had written down 25 names. He gave me 30. And I said, when he was done, he said, "Those are my battle buddies I lost." He goes, "I lost 12 over there. I lost the rest when they came home." Wow. And he said, "Why did they die if we're only going to ruin our country from within?" And I got to tell you, I had no answer for that. Do you know what I mean? Nor did I have any answer for the unspeakable amount of loss that was. Like I'm an old person, and I could probably name 5 people very close to me who passed at the ripe old age of 90. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But these are young people, vital people, and they are the people we should be protecting the most in our nation. Those who volunteer their lives, to protect us.
And we need to get our nation's leadership on board and supporting them, but we also need to get each other, our individual. We can't wait for our nation's leadership to do it.
Correct. I agree. That's one of the reasons RLF, Resurrecting Lives Foundation, was forward. I said, I can't wait for we actually, through AMVET's Post 26 up in Mansfield, funded the first research to prove that the blast injury caused a brain injury. And that was done by Michael Lipton, a PhD, MD, who at that time was working at Einstein College of Medicine in the Bronx, now is at Columbia. But what I'm saying is that we were able to do, and it was published by 2012, and it wasn't accepted till kind of down the road. The RAND Corporation brought it up in 2004. We were able to prove it in 2010 and get it published in 2012. But I mean, we've got to move quicker. One of my veterans sent me a quote, and I believe it was by Tutu, but I'm not quite sure, so don't quote me on my quote of him. I'm pretty sure he says, sooner or later, you got to quit picking up the bodies that are floating down the river and go upriver and find out why they fell in to begin with. And I think what happens is that we need to appreciate our military members, their families, when they come back out to, give them the gold standard, the best education, the best health care, and the absolute best chance at employment. And I think the nation's ready for that. I mean, I really do believe that we as a nation realize when we go on TV now, when you watch TV, our military has become kind of the chaos fighters of the world, have they not?
We've always sort of been the world police in a respect. But no, I think we are. I do see a big difference, though, even with our youth today, the numbers that are joining the military are not like they used to be in my generation, definitely not in my parents, my grandparents' generation. So I think it's also a little difficult to get America on board when, again, you don't quite have as many people that are experienced with the military or have relatives in the military like you once did.
True. That's true. And isn't this just kind of a win-win if we take better care of them when they come back and help with that transition so that like in, my father's era of World War II, they come back and there's plenty of things available for them. I think that would make a huge difference, don't you think? I mean,
yes.
To give them a jump start instead of making them lag behind because of their military service.
Instead of just sort of kicking them out and saying, thank you. And
right. Exactly.
Right.
And we do that a lot. And I really appreciate the fact that in the global war terror, people were, thank you for your service and clapping for them when they came back. But that didn't really
set them up to succeed.
Exactly. For a future. And that's what we really need for sure. I'd like to speak just a little bit, too, about the diversity of the military. We talk about the diversity of our country, and I think that, the military, I can't tell you, the first time that I went to, like, a commissary, it was at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, and I'm like, I'm a scaredy cat. I am not a courageous person. You guys are, that's why I think I back you up from here. You know what I mean? But, all of the weaponry and everything that was at that it was really kind of scary. I mean, then I go into the commissary, every language, every color skin, every religion. I mean, the most diverse population we have is our United States military. And, we've proven that by the percentage of people, both the Native Americans in the North Dakota, South Dakota, those in Arizona, those in Alaska, the Southeast Asians. We actually took a flag to Hawaii to honor the Southeast Asians as well. We have blacks, we have Hispanics. Our African American population, our Hispanic population are holding things together in the Southwest, in Texas, in New Mexico, Arizona, California. So I'm saying if we really want to bring the American dream full circle, let's take care of that diverse population when they get out of serving to help us out, right?
And I think from my own personal standpoint, I think that diverse population works in the military very much for the same reason. It works in the fire service because there's a lot more at stake. You literally are relying on that man or lady, that individual next to you for your life.
Yeah.
And they're relying on you. You may not, prior to that, you may not have cared for his or her, whatever, background, ethnicity,
right.
religion, whatever the case. And you still may not, but you have to work together. And in society in general, I don't think there's those stakes, to where it's a little easier for people to say, well, she's not like me. I'm going to stick to my own, so to speak. But in the military, especially I know in the fire service, it's family. You rely on each other. Fire service, we work 24 hours a day. I mean, we shopped, ate, slept, fought fires, medical calls.
And that's amazing.
It was family.
Yeah. That's amazing. And we need to get back to that. That's what we were founded on. And to the point of our U.S. military, I think that the leadership does a wonderful job. I'm not trying to say any general what to do. I don't want any general telling me what to do. So, that part's true. But I think we are getting to be, in some ways, I've heard the term softer society. I don't use that. I think we are becoming more compassionate. I think that the younger generation, it was interesting to me that when I interviewed these young men and women at the VA, when I was doing the second level traumatic brain injuries, that like 89%, when I asked them what they wished they could do now that they were back here in the United States, like I'm thinking they're going to talk about going to Disney World, do something, they all wanted to go back to either Iraq or Afghanistan, where they had come from, to help rebuild those societies. And I know of numerous Vietnam veterans who have been back, who have built schools and orphanages and hospitals. And so I think that is in our American DNA, to help. And I think that things like what you're doing bring that so to light. I mean, you are actually writing for people who you'll never meet. You never met Dino Krantz, and you kept that gentleman alive for 4 years after your ride. I think that didn't our Congressman Tim Ryan, much to your embarrassment, much to our delight, give you a congressional letter, of commendation, because it is something that you're doing, and we want other people to read about it, to see it, to emulate that, to replicate that in their daily lives.
But I think, again, most of our veterans, the ones that are going back to Iraq or want to, whether they are able to or not,
right?
Iraq, Afghanistan, to help rebuild, the Vietnam veterans that have gone back, they're not doing it for the accolades.
Not at all. Exactly.
They would much rather, if no one even knew they were doing it.
Right.
They're doing it because they believe it's the right thing to do.
Right, exactly. But the problem is that right now we don't have that many people doing anything because it's the right thing to do that are known. Because people who do the right thing for that don't want to be known. And I'm just saying, everybody in the listening audience who gets this, who's doing something, put it on our website. I mean, we need to start a revolution of compassionate kindness that other people can break into. And I know you're smiling, but it really is true. There's so much
I'm
good
smiling
that you're doing.
because I hope if they put it on your website, next time you pull them in here.
Oh, really? Is that what I knew that struck some kind of chord for you. I will too, guys. Whoever wants to come out there, let me know, because this is important, because leading by example, this is an amazing example you're giving to our nation, particularly in, like I said, this tough time of chaos in the world. We've got chaos in our environment. We've got chaos in, the conflicts that are going on. We've got chaos in our elective process. And let's just all calm down, work together, and know that, by what you're doing, you're going to bring a whole group of people to safety. And that's what we're hoping for. And then they, in turn, draw others. That's what happened last time. Some of their funding we used for transcendental meditation, and there was one veteran who wanted to take it. Before he was done, he had 16 other veterans leading other groups in transcendental meditation. Every single one of that original 16 was in danger of losing their job when they began. And out of the 16, 12 have had accommodations over the last 4 years for how well they've done at work. So, we do know some things that help. Let's just, like you said, everybody kind of has their own line. Let's find out, what that is. For me, it's chocolate. When I had, my thing, and then I have to exercise. So I get the endorphins both ways. That's what does it for me. I don't know what kind of endorphins you get, because of me, it seems like it would be depleted in the first 5 hours of being on a motorcycle and riding that. But you must get some,
For me, when I ride, I don't have the radio on. I'm not listening to anything. I just listen to the surroundings. You're focused on your ride. You're focused on people around you, the traffic around you. You have to ride very defensively. And then in particular with this challenge, the Hoka Hey actually says it's a test of your endurance, of your mental, physical, and emotional stamina, endurance.
Right.
I think the physical part of it is sort of self-explanatory.
Yes.
The mental part, again, is just sort of following those directions, turn by turn, making sure you don't miss. The emotional part, you do kind of get off track, and you realize you're off track. If you don't get that in check, it tends to steamroll.
Right.
And you're on a timeline, you're trying to make good time, and now you go a little bit faster, you take another wrong turn, and things get worse instead of better.
Yeah.
So emotionally, you have to stop, slow down, put things in check. If you have to, take a break, figure out where you're at, get back on the right track, and continue your ride. And again, I think that kind of relates to just life in general.
Yeah.
Not getting overwhelmed, looking for help when you need help, stepping back, taking a break.
Getting back to nature, too. Getting back to the things that are much more powerful than we are, right? I mean, for sure. That is a really great analogy, and I'm not even going to try to add on that. So I'm just going to kind of wrap us up and get us out of this little podcast to our listening audience to say that, I really hope that you have felt, the need for bringing our nation together, the need for, protecting those who protect you, and that you'll stay on our website, kind of follow Patrick's ride. I hope that you can donate for some of the satellites that we're going to be doing, for some of the programs that we're going to be starting for veterans, and that you definitely contact your particular congresspeople, U.S. Congress, U.S. Senate. They are coming together. I know they've been fighting for the last 4 years. I think it's because the American people are now, kind of demanding that we do something to bring us all together. And that's really good. I mean, that is what democracy is all about. I will tell you, I have the privilege of working with veterans every single day. And I'm getting choked up even as I'm saying that. This is one of the veterans that just humbles me and makes me want to do more every single day. And I hope that Patrick's Ride does the same for you. And if you are a veteran who is struggling, please remember Patrick, remember his number, remember 988. Remember to call those particular agencies that are available within your community. And please kind of check out resurrectinglives.org, see what kinds of things we will be doing, what kind of funding we will be getting, and where we're going to be putting that funding. And you have a say in that, because we are not, an organization who has major overhead. We have 10 cents on a dollar maybe for what we have to maintain an office in order to maintain our IRS 501c3. But we are doing this for our veterans. They've given so much to us. Let's give it back, and let's follow Patrick. Hoka Hey, let's thank all of our Native Americans, all of our diverse population within the military. And let's make August a month for the nation to remember, because we made it that way. Thank you so much. See you on the next Brainstorms.
If you are thinking about harming yourself or attempting suicide, tell someone who can help right away. Call 911 for emergency services. Go to the nearest hospital emergency room. Call or text 988 to connect with the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. This podcast is made possible thanks to a grant from the Overwatch Alliance, and it's produced by the Resurrecting Lives Foundation at the Sycamore Studio. Music is written, performed, and graciously provided by Tim Beckley. Remember, when you work toward brain injury recovery, it is best to journey with a friend and keep your gait steady and your spirit strong. Finally, always seek shelter from your storms.